Welcome to the Cruising is Life podcast. Whether you're a seasoned cruiser or just starting out, we have something for everyone. So sit back, relax, and get ready to set sail with us on the Cruising is Life podcast.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Cruising is Life podcast. Welcome back for another very exciting episode. We are joined by Justin, as always. Welcome back, our co-host here, and Tyler from the Cruise Junkie, the Tyler Show. How's it going, guys?
Good.
What's going on, everyone? How is it going here on a Tuesday night?
Yes,
if you're watching this live.
We are doing this a day early because somebody has some Valentine's Day plans. So we're doing a little early. But
yes.
But yeah, it'll be fun. We got a very exciting topic. We're diving into basically the world or like the side of cruising that passengers don't necessarily see, and that's the harbor pilots.
That's right. We are. It's going to be exciting. And we got two of us who's been out on the pilot boat. Justin's been lucky enough to actually be on the actual ship here, which we'll get into in just a moment. But yeah, this is the unsigned scene of cruising here. Most of the time people are on the cruise ship. This is the last part of cruising they think about. But it is a vital part. It is found in pretty much any cruise port, major cruise port that is. Private islands don't typically have pilots, but any other port, you're going to expect one of the marine pilots to get on the ship and navigate that vessel in and out of port with undocking and all of the good stuff here. Yeah, so that's going to be an exciting episode here because I love talking about pilots. It's one of my favorite things.
Oh, yeah. And Tyler, you're actually planning to go to school to be a pilot. Is that correct?
Yes, that is currently the plan. Hopefully that does not change, but yes, that is the current plan right now to eventually one day be a pilot. Yes.
See, you're the perfect person to have on here then. And of course, like mentioned earlier, Justin's actually been on the pilot boat. So we got the two guys here that are going to be really good to have on here. We tried to get a pilot to actually come on. We couldn't get somebody to actually commit. So unfortunately, if that ever does come around, we'll definitely do another like a follow-up episode. If we can actually get like an actual, yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
But both of you have experienced what the pilots do and everything like that. So it'll be a good people to have on here for our topic today. Before we start, I do want to say since the news broke this morning, we're getting a new Carnival ship finally.
Yes, that is exciting.
Was that on your bingo card for this morning? A new XL class?
No, absolutely not. No, far from it.
I'm not saying I'm upset by having a new XL class, but that's the last thing I expected. If with Carnival announcing a new ship and all of that I was not expecting a fourth XL class.
Yeah, absolutely here.
Not.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with it. I know wherever they do it, and it's not coming out till 2027, so we've got a long way to go before we even hear anything.
Yep.
Anything on names? Or do you guys think there's any names coming out or that are gonna go up with it?
Is there maybe how do you pronounce it? Festival?
Festival?
Yeah,
yes.
Probably. I would agree with Josh. That's probably something I would agree. Probably share a name of like an old ship. Probably.
Yeah.
Probably the
It'll definitely be a retro name, whatever it may be. The next class of ship, we're gonna go back to the original names. I'm hoping, but given the XL class and how that's already been, it's gonna be a retro name. I've seen. So I was thinking either Destiny, just because of how significant the Destiny was. Back in the 90s when it came out, or the Tropical, but I saw somebody mention the Holiday, and the Holiday is actually there's three Holiday class: the Holiday, Celebration, and the Jubilee. We already have the Celebration and the Jubilee.
Yeah.
So I think it's very likely that we might actually get the Holiday. This might end up being
that would be
name.
Cool.
Yeah.
I would like that.
That would be neat.
It would be it'd be a cool little throwback, and of course complete that class.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, back on topic. Mostly just wanted to touch on that because that was actually that news broke like within the last few hours. So, But yeah, anyways, back onto the harbor pilot. So, Justin, you've actually been on the pilot boat and actually on the ship. So like, what is it that you kind of did whenever you were on there?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a pretty long story, but I'll kind of try and condense it. But basically, I tagged along with one of the pilots in Fort Lauderdale, and she helped guide out the celebrity ascent. I just kind of rode along with them, but we basically got on board, met up with the captain on the bridge, and he kind of gave us a rundown of what was going on, and she gave him a rundown of the way the wind was blowing and the currents in the channel and some of the other traffic that was coming out at the time. I think there was a barge coming out from Terminal 29 that had to wait for us. So she basically just gave them that kind of information, and then once the Caribbean Princess pushed off and left, actually as she was straightening out and heading out is when we started to push off the dock. And honestly, from there, she gave very little information, just a little bit here and there as we were turning, and kind of where to put the aft of the ship to begin spinning it in this designated turn area inside the port. And then about, I would say, a mile or so off the coast, she had the guy that was steering the ship turn it to a certain, I think it was 180 degrees, something like that, at a certain angle to allow us to disembark the ship from the ladder onto the pilot boat. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely, I mean, there was a lot more than that, but it was really cool.
Yeah, it seems like a really, really cool thing to do. And you, like, the fact that you actually got to climb down the ladder and everything like that was crazy. How was that?
Yes, it was, so it's not, so the waves were rough, but when we turned the ship and the pilot boat came alongside, we were within the wake of the ship, or like the side wake, so it was a little bit smoother. So the transition from the ship to the pilot boat was fairly easy. But it's definitely a very unique experience walking down the side of a, mega cruise ship, almost 1,000 feet long, however big Celebrity Ascent is. So yeah, it was definitely a unique experience.
Yeah, that for sure. And so pretty much it's mostly that they just kind of there to give pointers and things like that. I feel like the biggest misconception with pilots is that they take over.
They do to an extent, but
right.
Not 100%. They're not actually, most ports, again, I want to put this in parentheses here. Each port is different on the way they handle ships, but for cruise ships, most of the time the pilots are hands off in terms of actual getting on the controls and navigating. Cargo ships at some ports, however, like Palm Beach, I'm going down there actually next weekend, and down there they actually do manual ship handling. The pilots actually get on the controls of the ship and dock the ship. But that's only with cargo ships. Cruise ships, as Justin would allude to there, kind of is there to give you correct pointers and corrections. One thing, Justin, I'm sure you can agree, you probably heard the pilot saying starboard 15, that is what they call con, control navigation. Basically, what the pilot has it all in their head, their knowledge. Okay, at this point at the port, I need to be traveling at a course of, let's say, 127 degrees. So they'll tell the math equation. So basically from there, say they're at starboard, 117, they'll say, okay, we'll go ahead and move to starboard, starboard 10 degrees, so then they can move the ship to the right so they can get to 127, or vice versa here. Midship is another call out that the pilots give. Midship, basically that means is you're wanting to go straight ahead, no more movement of the rudder. So that's what the pilot pretty much does. Pilot is on there and he's giving most of the time channel agreements. Like in Canaveral, for example, I rode along with the Canaveral pilots 3 times, know them really, really well here. In Canaveral, the pilot takes the control navigation basically from the time the pilot gets up to the bridge after the master pilot exchange, which, as Justin alluded to earlier, that was when the pilot and the captain talked over. She said, hey, there's this vessel here. And then the captain said, okay, well, we're running all thrusters. We're all good to go. That was the master pilot exchange. It happens every time a ship comes in and out of port with a pilot. Now, with our departures, it's pretty more easier for the master pilot exchange to happen, because with the master pilot exchange on departures, they're up at the bridge, they're docked, they don't have to worry about time. Versus, that's why when you see pilots get out further on the ship further out when they're coming in, because they need time to do that exchange before they hit the first obstacle, or in the case of Canaveral, the first pair of buoys. Then the pilot will, in Canaveral's case, take it all the way into the channel. Once they get close to the dock, the pilot will give back the con to whatever officer of the ship is driving the ship that day or navigating the ship to the dock. The pilot is pretty much hands off for the docking process. He or she is only really there for the transit to and from the dock. I'm sure, Justin, you probably can agree it's somewhat similar. Again, it varies port by port, so I want to believe that there. It's not the same at one port. It's very different, but they all follow the very similar idea.
Yes, no, it was almost identical to what you said in Fort Lauderdale. Their approach or departure area is a lot shorter than it is in Canaveral. They pretty much just go straight out. And then depending on how the wind is, they'll either take the ship straight out, go a little bit north, go a little bit south. And like I said, we were only about a mile or so off the coast, if that, when we disembarked. And after she gave, I say, control back to the cat, after she kind of like said we were leaving, she basically just said, just be on the lookout. We got a cargo ship over here. There's a couple small boats here. And then Icon of the Seas was actually on a test cruise just on the horizon. So she basically said, just beware of that. But other than that, like, you guys are good to go whichever direction. I think they were going to Nassau that day. So after we disembarked, they kind of turned back east just a little bit and went straight out.
Yes, and what you
Nice.
mentioned to a little earlier was what they call when the ship makes a lee or swing. That is done, as Justin was saying, for the pilot boat to come alongside. Basically, what from the pilot boat's perspective here, what they're looking for is that's what like Justin said, like the pilot told the ship to go to a certain degree. Again, each port specifically, like when you were on the boat operator told the pilot, "Hey, go to this degree." Canaveral and some other ports, the boat operator is only going to say, "Hey, swing. You probably can swing a little bit outside the channel." The pilot will come up with the number. But basically, what they're looking for is time where a situation where number one, the wind, right? The other reason is you notice that like most cruise ships, like Justin was going on, the ladder was rigged, I believe, on the starboard side of the ship. And that's
Yes.
because when the ship hugs the coast, again, most of the rough wind will be on the side facing the rough ocean. That would be on the port side, Port Everglades, if they're turning down the coast. And Canaveral, vice versa here with your starboard side getting off because the starboard side of the ship hugs the coast, and port side coming back because the port side is sheltered. So that's the reason there is you want to turn. The other thing too is the degree they're looking for when they're turning is kind of want to match the waves so that the cruise ship can handle the waves pretty well, but you're talking a pilot boat, which is riding the waves differently. They're not riding the waves the same way. Like the cruise ship may be rolling a little different than what the pilot boat can be rolling. So that's
Right.
the reason there for the turn, as Justin was saying
Yeah.
there.
There's a big difference in size with the pilot boat and the
Absolutely.
cruise ships,
Yeah.
for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
it was
they're-
definitely a rough ride getting back in. It was nice and
Exactly.
smooth on the ship out, and the pilot boat was really. I mean, it took
Yes.
it well, but we were
Yeah.
moving around heading back to the port.
Yeah.
And I think there
Those
are
no
some
pressure
pilot
boats handle it
boats.
pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, aren't some pilot boats like meant to be smoother riding? Like I think like some of them have like weight. The weight distribution is just different on some of them, just to make them ride a little bit better.
So the one Justin was on was a Bill Preston pilot boat. Bill Preston is a renowned marine architect here. He's designed pretty much anything from any vessel. He's pretty much designed them all. But one of his
Nice.
most famous designs is the pilot boat design. He's been honing that craft for many years, basically since like the 1990s. And Port Everglades has had a fleet of 3, and they now have 2, but they're building another Bill Preston pilot boat. What makes these Bill Preston pilot boats very interesting, Canaveral has 2, by the way, is their engine is in the front of the boat. For most pilot boats, typically the engine is in the back. But the reason why Bill decided to go with this design is why it's one of the safety standards in the industry is because think about it as a way of a surfboard. That's how he thought of it when he was riding in his childhood on the Gulf Shore, which is where Bill was from. Basically, he wants to crest a wave. Instead of having the weight in the front of the boat, imagine you get on the actual ship. I'll give you an example right here. When you go on the wave crest here, instead of having the engine here because the weight's here, when you hit the wave, now your bow
Sends the front end up.
is going to go up. Now, but if you have the weight in the front, as soon as you crest that wave, the bow is going to pitch down, so you're not having that pitch. And that pitch is very dangerous for pilot transfers because your boat's alongside, right? It's bobbing, hits a left wave, your deck's flying up. Versus
Right.
instead of this situation, it's just going to go down. So it's one of those pilot boats that are very, very safe. And they're some of the best designed in the industry in terms of safety because of that aspect here. And I'm sure Justin could attest to it. He was out in pretty rough seas, but yet that boat handled it like a champ, that is for sure.
Yeah, and you can definitely feel it as we were going over the wave. You can feel it, being brought down from that weight. It was a unique feeling, but it definitely helped with the transfer because, like I said, I was sitting on the ship even before we left, and I'm looking out. There's white caps, so I'm like, oh, this is going to be a rough one. But once I got down to the crew, like where they opened the door to drop the ladder, I mean, the boat was almost flat with us. So like
Wow.
I just walked right off, and then once we came out of that little wake area, is when we started to go over the wave. So it was definitely a weird sensation heading back in, but it was cool. It was very, very cool.
Yeah, I feel like
That's awesome.
the engine being in the front of the boat is definitely something I've never heard of until, just diving a little bit more into like the deeper side of pilot boats. Like it's such a simple thing that you would think of like, oh yeah, it makes it handle better, obviously. But, that's something I've never seen on like just your standard boat.
You're correct. Up until Bill Preston with his boat design that really changed the industry in terms of that aspect. He actually, when he went to the shipyards to build these boats, the shipyards were like, "Are you crazy? All pilot boats have their engines in the back." Took a lot of convincing, but once it hit the market and all the pilots started using it, it became a very staple of pilot boats. Actually, matter of fact, Canaveral has a Bill Preston, Port Everglades has one. I believe Panama Canal has a few, as
Wow.
well as Nassau has one of the old Port Everglade boats. And I'm not sure 100%. I believe they're Port Everglades probably going to sell off one of the other Bill Prestons and replace it with the new Bill Preston, or get rid of the Baltic workboats. So the Baltic workboat's an interesting vessel because that's the other boat that Port Everglades has, and that one it is it's not exactly the best pilot boat for the U.S. market. I'll put it that way. Those boats are fantastic in Europe, but in the U.S. they're not exactly the best boat. So looking at getting rid of that one. It's public information. If you go literally type in pilot boat for sale, that one will pop up like first on your list. It's kind of funny. $800,000, guys. You want to go buy a pilot boat?
Oh, I could do
Sure.
that.
Let's
I
do
would
it. Let's
love
do it.
to.
I mean, new ship spotting boat. There you go.
So this may sound like a dumb question. It is just I don't. It's the first thing that came to my mind. But you say it's like it was a pilot boat that's not great for the U.S., but it's great over in Europe. Why is that?
So one of the reasons is it's a lot of European design, and a lot of the reasons I believe is parts. Some of the parts are
Okay.
tricky to get because it's European design. I believe it's U.S. built. I'm not sure 100% on that. I don't. Maybe Justin, you know anything more about that? Is it U.S. design? I'm not sure, but yeah, more of the story here is yeah, that's the reason you only see one Baltic workboat pilot boat as of right now in the U.S., which is interesting. This is interesting here. So Miami just got two brand new pilot boats here. They have the Comp Millennia. These are composite boats here, there was a big risk for Miami to make Biscayne Bay pilots was to make them. It was a big risk for them to make because composite it is fiberglass. So when that goes alongside the ship, that was the biggest worry here. Well, they have the original pilot boat Lightspeed here, which is their short boat that can do. It's like a 30 something foot, 36-foot pilot boat. It looks very similar to what a Bill Preston pilot boat looks like, besides it's a catamaran look. Anyway, that boat was an absolute game changer for them and an absolute home run. That boat does like 39 miles an hour, and then they just
Wow.
repowered it recently. I think it can do 40 miles an hour, which is unheard of for a pilot boat. I mean,
That's
that makes it so you
fast.
can be able to go fat to and from them. That's another thing too. The reason you want to spend a lot of money on your pilot boats here is number one, pilot safety, of course, with the transfer being,
Hmm.
a bigger platform or a more stable platform. But the other reason too is the quicker your boat can go, I mean, the more jobs you can do with less pilots. The less pilots means everyone at the end of the day is making more money. So that's kind of your bottom line here. The quicker the pilot can get to and from the next job is the more money everyone is making all around. So it's a win-win the faster your boat can go. And that's actually a funny story. So this is a little history back into the history of marine piloting. That's kind of how the way pilot associations first started. They weren't started like they are today, where everyone kind of works together as teams, everyone uses the same boat, and vice versa. Back in the day, they used to have competing pilots where they would use their own sailboat. This is back in the day of sailboats, where they would race as soon as they see a ship on the horizon. You see like 10 pilots all getting on their sailboat, racing to a ship. First one to get on board gets the job. There was none of this, oh, this pilot's going to be here for this stuff. Again, pilotage has come a long way, but some things like the rope ladder, for example, on the ships, that has not changed since the beginning of pilotage.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's really I never
Absolutely.
never thought of that or never even heard of that before. That's really. Do you imagine just like 10 sailboats go flying up to you as you're coming over the horizon? I'd be like,
Being
what's
invaded.
going on here?
Yeah.
You ever heard of the World Cup of Sailing? Like they have those races, whatever.
Oh, the America's Cup Regatta.
Yes, yes. Actually, I believe this is one of the pilot boats in like San Francisco or somewhere. Actually, is now competing in that, is winning all this time because yeah, it used to be one of these. It used to be a pilot boat. It was built to go like 30 knots or something like that. Don't correct me on the speed. Not 100%.
Speaking
Not 100% with these sailing pilot boats, but still, it's crazy. Definitely.
speaking of the America's Cup Regatta, you'll definitely like this now. We next time we do like a big group cruise or something like that, like all of us go. We need to go. We make sure it goes to Saint Martin because they
Okay.
have. I did a video on it when I went there on the Wonder, but they have. It's the Stars and Stripes and True North. True North is the Canadian one. I think they used to. They're like the original, like the real ones that they used back in the day. But those
Okay.
are I guess like the actual cup yachts that they would use to race. But essentially, that's what you're doing. You're controlling them. You know, they've got a couple people doing the grinding. There's a couple people that are like doing other stuff like that. There's usually one guy that's just handing out beers, but but like, it's really cool. It's a very labor intensive shore excursion, but it's a lot of fun. Anytime we go to St. Martin, we make sure like we do that. Like me,
That's
my
awesome.
dad, and my grandfather
Sounds
will
like
always make sure that we go. Like, the girls will just stay on the ship. They'll go shopping, do whatever. But like all the guys, we always make sure we do that because it's a ton of fun.
absolutely.
So
They always say it's a good day being out on the water. That's for sure.
for sure, yeah, it's probably one of my favorite shore excursions. So
That's awesome.
next time we all plan a cruise together, if we're gonna do a 7th day, we gotta make sure it goes to St. Martin. We'll do that.
Okay, sounds like a plan. I love the Eastern Caribbean, so that's
I'll have to show you
win-win.
the video.
That part about the Western Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean, the pilot boats are hit and miss. St. Thomas has a really good few pilot boats, and then some of the other ones kind of they're hit and miss in terms of the pilot boats.
Yeah, St. Thomas had a very nice one that met up with us.
Yes, they have two of
in
them.
the
They
week.
have a North River pilot boat, and then they got a Metal Shark pilot boat. So yeah, they got two nice ones.
It's funny. I've heard. So I don't remember what ship this was, but one of the captains of a ship I was on, they were like, "Oh yeah, the Caribbean harbor pilots. They're basically just good for making sure the coffee machines still work." That's basically all he had to say. He's like, "Yeah, they just pretty much make sure the coffee
Yeah,
machine still
those
works in the
cruise ship
mornings."
captains and harbor pilots, they're it's always it's a love-hate relationship, I swear. Yeah, they're like, well, we kind of need you by law, but like, yeah, most of the cruise ship captains are kind of very anti-pilot because they think they can just handle it all by themselves. But in the
Yeah.
reality, at the end of the day, it's just good to have a pilot on board because they know the port. Unlike that's another reason too. So pilotage is needed. Pilots are needed because a cruise ship captain, how many ports does he go through during his contract? What, probably, I don't
Hundreds.
know, 60 probably, one a day, divided by how many days he's on. I mean, you're talking different ports. He's also moving, every day, different ports, different weather patterns. So he doesn't know the local area like the pilot does. The pilot pretty much eats, sleeps, and knows the area at that port here. He's on the water. He or she's on the water every day here. And the other thing too is most pilots, not all of them, but most of them are local residents. They grew up on that water. Now, not all of them. There are, nowadays a lot of pilots in the U.S. are coming in from other states, but for the most part, most pilots are born and raised on that water that they pilot because that's why they want to be a pilot. They grew up on that water. They love it. So
Yeah.
it's
They
very
know it.
interesting nonetheless. Yep.
Yep, they know it pretty much. If they've been on those waters, whatever it's surfing, boating, fishing, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, like, if they've been doing it that long, they definitely know what they're doing, and they definitely know, that the currents, the depths, all of that, and that's of course the crucial part is making sure like, oh yeah, by the way, there's like there's a reef over here, there's a drop off over here, like stay within these parameters, so you don't run aground, things like that.
The other thing too, which is very interesting about pilots too, is as you mentioned there, they know a lot of things. Another thing, when a cruise ship captain is coming into port, he doesn't know for the most part, who to talk to. He doesn't know, okay, call the guy down there, call the guy at the port, tell him, hey, we're coming in. Can you lower the gangway? The cruise ship captain will just call maybe the wrong person. They don't even know who to call. The pilot knows all that. The other thing too, the cruise ship captain may come into port. He may see a small boat over there. And he'll be like, that's a hazard. Versus the pilot will be like, nope, he's out of the way. He'll stay just there. Everything will be just fine because he knows that local boat operator, or vice versa here. I've seen that happen many times in Canaveral, where the pilot will be like, okay, that's our good friend Captain Walt with a fishing boat. He'll stay over to the south. Everything will work out just fine versus situations where the cruise ship captain may not be comfortable with getting around those other smaller vessels here versus the pilot. That's what all they do is hang out with these small vessels here, which Justin, luckily you were on the water when it was not the best. So you weren't able to see the fiasco of the zillion small boats trying to get in and out of these ports. It's quite the mess.
Right. So we actually did have on departure, there was, I don't know if it was a charter fishing, but it was a smaller boat on
Okay.
its way out just as we were starting to back out. So it really wasn't in the way yet. And that the same thing happened, the captain was like, oh, like, do we need to like do something? And she's like, no, like they know to stay on the north side of the jetty as we're coming out. So yeah, like you said, the pilot, even if they don't do too much, like in my case, it was really just some general knowledge about the kind of weather conditions for that day. They are a good point of contact for pretty much anything going around in the port.
Exactly. It's pretty much like a port advisor coming on saying, okay, you're good. Don't worry about that. Hey, that gangway going down. Trust me, it's going to go down. And that's the
Right.
other thing too. Like, the cool thing is you can listen to on the radio. The pilots, most pilots at most places, they have the VHF radios, what they use to communicate with everyone on the water. And there they'll communicate, okay, this is going to happen here, this is going to happen here, and this is going to happen here. So again, just proves to show that pilots, they're needed no matter what. And that's the thing too. People are like, oh well, computers can replace them, but in reality, no one's going to know the port like a human. It's pretty much it. No one's going to know. Okay, Steve on his boat's going to be just fine. Ain't going to bother me today. So
Right. Exactly.
Technology has its flaws. I mean, yeah, human error is much more frequent than technology, going bad, things like that, or a technology issue. But I mean, you always got to take into account. I mean, systems crash, computers crash, websites crash, things like that. So I mean, it's they're not dummy proof just because you have the newest technology on board.
Right.
But going back to like what you were saying, with communicating and things like that, like we have the radios that we of course we don't talk on them because we're not allowed to.
Don't do that, guys. Don't do that. Nope.
Don't talk on the radios.
No.
But
You know who you are.
Mariners only. That's right.
But we were able to listen to them, and but we use it for a ship spotting standpoint where we can just say, we hear the pilots. Oh, Skirte, like the Harmony of the Sea, or why did I say Harmony? She hasn't been here in forever, but
That's
Harmony of
what
the
I would
Seas,
say.
Harmony of the Seas, dropping lines, getting ready to go underway, for all the people that are there. But every now and then you'll see like the fishing boats or the charter boats that are going in and out, even sometimes the sailboats. You'll just hear like, oh hey, like I know one of the charter fishing boats, like the Carnival Princess, because it happens like every weekend. But it's, or even Victory 1, the casino boat. I know Caleb's probably not here, so he might not freak out. But
Thank God.
it's the you'll hear, Carnival Princess, we're inbound on the channel, Wonder, we're gonna meet you port to port. Like, that way, so the captains can kind of listen to that as well, and the pilots are listening to that to where they know, like, hey, yeah, there's a fishing boat coming in, there's a charter boat coming in, and they know what they're doing. They're gonna they already said they're going to try to meet you on the port side. So, just kind of keep out for that and things like that.
Absolutely. That is crucial, having the contact properly throughout. That's the other thing, too, is here in Canaveral, that's one thing I love about Canaveral pilots, and in fact, the whole waterways, is they're very good going ahead and making contact with these people on radio versus some other ports. You never hear the pilot. So that's one thing about Canaveral, is they're very good at alerting everyone, knowing they're doing their security call. Sometimes they'll do it like 3 times, of course, 3 times normal, but then they'll sometimes even do it another time once they're actually coming off the dock. So they'll do their go ahead, and they'll do that, that
security. The Wonder of the Seas is dropping lines getting underway Port Canaveral bound for sea. Any concerned traffic, come up channel 12.
So go ahead and do that many times. So they go ahead and do that, right? Again, it happens many times throughout the cruise. By the way, how did you like that new?
Hold on a second. Hold on. What?
The look for those who are listening, the look on Justin's face is priceless right now.
Classic.
The switch over to that audio was so instant. I thought I was losing my mind.
Bro is so subtle with that. He's playing with his little voice changer he got.
Oh my god!
Guys, we'll use it on the secret episode we're filming. That's right.
Oh, shh. The secret
episode. Bro, where have I been?
Stay tuned, guys. Stay tuned for the podcast listeners. There's big things planned in March. I think that's it, right?
That's secret episode. We're doing
I see.
For those who are listening to this one, you're getting a sneak peek. We're doing a lot. Well, not live, but we're doing
you just spoiled it. Oh man.
Well, we're gonna do a podcast on board because we have a lot of us on that cruise.
Right.
There's gonna be 6 of us now. Well, including Alex, there's gonna be 6. I don't know if she's gonna be on the podcast, but there's gonna be a lot of us.
On there.
That'd be sick.
Yeah, get everyone on the podcast, guys. The whole
but
ship.
we got a big
Yeah,
group
we'll
going on the Liberty with
there,
us.
too.
Exactly. We got a big group going on Liberty with us next week or next month. Next week is
I
Icon.
wish it was next week.
Yeah,
Next week would be nice. Next week would be nice.
If you guys were all coming on Icon, that'd be crazy. But
Oh my word, that'd be the best group cruise ever, man.
on Liberty, we're gonna be a lot of us, and we're gonna do a podcast. It's gonna be a recorded one to where we're just gonna upload it like normal instead of streaming it. But it'll be a fun time.
Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi is not the best on the ships. So.
Right, and that's kind of why we're not gonna stream it.
Yeah. Yep. But it'll be live, guys. We'll do it live, pre-recorded, but it'll be live.
Okay.
Right.
A live pre-recorded video, my favorite.
That's right.
Speaking of live, though, on the ship, next week, just shouting out next week's podcast, I will be on board Icon of the Seas.
That's
These
right.
two will be here, of course, as the normal co-hosts, but I will be on board Icon of the Seas, giving my first impressions, my first few days into the cruise, about halfway, like a
You're going on
mid-cruise.
Icon next week?
No.
I didn't know.
No, I'm going on
That's
Majesty.
about in every video.
I love Majesty,
Every
the world's
video.
largest cruise ship.
That's right. You better use that in every title. Every title must have the world's largest cruise ship. That's right.
Yes, indeed. But anyways, back
Yes.
on topic. Just shouting out
Back
next.
to piloting.
Look forward to next week. It's gonna be fun. But
That's right,
back
it
into
will. It will.
piloting. Where were
The
we?
world of pilots.
Just
We're talking about security
keeping.
calls, but I
yeah.
think that's pretty good. We wrapped up that discussion here. Pilot boats. We get back to pilot boats here for a second here. Pilot boats, actually, fun fact, are not the only way pilots can get on a ship here. There are other ways. However, pilot boats is the most common way for them to get on board. And places all around the world, one of the ones in the U.S. that uses this is all the way in the Columbia Bar pilots in Oregon. They use helicopters. So you know how they usually do medevacs on cruise ships? Well, they pretty much do the same thing for a pilot. Basically, they go ahead and hoist the pilot down onto one of the upper decks of the ship, and the pilot is on. Now, they do that in mostly the areas where there is rough seas. That would make a pilot transfer very close to catastrophic 90% of the time. So that is why they use it. So like in the Colombian Bar, they use it. I believe somewhere else in Africa, they use it as well. Again, it is expensive route for a pilot transfer, but it is safer. So that's something that probably
This
didn't
is a
know.
James Bond movie.
That should be the only way to be put on a cruise ship is to
That's
be dropped
right.
in the
That's
helicopter.
right.
That
normal
would be
normal
amazing.
passengers. Normal
Oh
passengers
yeah,
get dropped.
and
by
they
it.
have to have their suitcases with them too.
That's right. James Bond.
Yeah,
Doo,
hold
doo,
on,
doo.
man.
Oh my god.
I like
That's
that.
cool.
That's
I didn't
crazy.
know
I
that.
never even
Yes.
even thought of that.
Can you
I
imagine
bet
being a passenger and you're just like sitting there, the ship's getting underway,
I'm like, oh my
the
god, a
guy comes flying
helicopter.
in. Oh my
I-
god.
Oh.
I would imagine probably like Cape Town, like South Africa, like
Yeah, I
going
think
around the
that's one
horn
of the
there.
ones,
That's
yes.
probably one of the places because that place is like notorious. Like even like Drake's Passage, like on the tip of South America. That's like, over in
Yes.
Cape Town. That's like known for being very very rough. I don't know the name of that waterway there, but it's known for being extremely rough.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Here, yep, that's just something that they have. Again, that's another thing too. Is with pilot transfers, people think, oh, the rope's ladder. There has to be a better way to do it. Strapping on to things. No, the rope ladder is that way for a reason, and because is you don't want a harness. Imagine having to rely on someone first of all to make sure first of all, you have to rely on the ship's crew. You have to trust the ship's crew that they've rigged the ladder properly. Which, if you've seen any pilot transfers, you'll know they're always doing something with the ladder. They're always messed something up. That's pretty notorious. I've been out on the pilot boat 3 times in Canaveral. In pretty much every one of our trips, they've messed up something with the rigging of the ladder. It's nothing major. Most of the time, they can make it work. But it is something that is a serious problem here. So that's why they stick with that basic rope ladder setup, because the pilot has pretty much control of when he's chopping off. He doesn't have to rely on someone else unclipping him or vice versa here. The other thing someone mentioned too was, why don't you use a bucket system? Well, the same reason here is you're going to have to rely on someone else to have the right training and vice versa here. So the rope's ladder, what they call the Jacob's ladder, is the only way, besides, of course, the helicopter hoist, for pilots to get to and from work every single day here.
Interesting.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
I was just
The world
thinking of
pilots.
like, oh, why didn't they harness them? But that makes kind of sense there. I mean, yeah.
They don't want someone's life to be in jeopardy. Yep.
I mean,
Someone else's hands.
I don't trust the bartender named Mario on the Allure, so why would I trust some, the why would I trust the crew
Yeah.
members on a ship to get me on and off of there too? So
That's right.
Thing,
Mario gave us a very interesting night. Honestly, an interesting weekend.
That was an interesting cruise, guys. That was one of a kind. It
I don't
was
know
great.
what was going in those drinks, but it was something crazy.
I was watching some
Maybe
of the
on
clips,
Liberty.
and I
No,
don't
I'm
even
just
remember making them. Like, when did we do this?
That's right. What? Like crazy times.
Anyways,
God.
pilot
Back
boat.
on subject, pilots. So, Justin, any more tidbits from your great Port Everglades pilot trip on this Liberty Ascent?
That is a good question. It was just really cool to see the inner workings of how they maneuver the ship out of port. Like once we got off so the Edge class ships dock starboard side in Fort Lauderdale because they've got the magic carpet. So I think they don't want that hanging off the other side as like cargo ships are coming out. So we were on the starboard side wing of the bridge. We were pushing off, and then as we were about halfway through, give or take, the turn to line up, they switched. I don't even know, they called it something, the con over to the center because they don't need to look down the side of the ship at that point anymore. And they've got video monitors up there so they can see it regardless. But it was just cool to see how they actually operated and, the different commands they call out. Like when we were on the bridge wing, they were calling out certain commands to one of the ladies in the middle of the bridge, and they were just giving out information as we were pushing off. And, when we cleared the bow from the pier, that's what they called, to start swinging the aft around. And so it was just cool to see the different call outs and kind of all the little things that you don't see if you're just sitting up on the deck, watching the ship come off, and you think it's pretty easy. But there's a lot of, it gets very quiet. Like it was kind of not loud, but a lot of people were talking and stuff when we first got on because it was like kind of like a chilled area. But once we started dropping ropes, like it got quiet. Only certain people were talking, and it was a very controlled environment. So it was really cool. It was a very unique experience to see all those little things taking place as we were coming out.
That's really crazy.
I can imagine. And you guys see them all the time, sailorways. So this must have been a cool, a new perspective. So when you're on cruises going forward, so you probably were like, oh, okay, so this is kind of what's happening underneath, and whatever. It must have been a very eye-opening experience for anyone. I mean, it was eye-opening for me when I did my first ride along Canaveral many summers ago. So, yeah, I mean, it's a different perspective, and it changes your whole perspective on cruising. I mean, in terms of the navigational side, I mean, because most people think it's easy to just go in, little right wheel, get off the dock, there you go. But a lot more complex than that.
I do it in Cruise Ship Simulator, and I do a pretty good
Captain
job.
Brandon.
Yeah, exactly.
Captain Brandon's only sank the Quantum once, so.
But I also got to ride. I also got to ride the pilot boat once I got off the ship. We dropped our pilot off, and they let me stay on and follow the other ships out. So we got to watch Symphony of the Seas push off and go out. So we were originally supposed to follow her out and pick up her pilot, but I was out filming stuff. So when I went back in, thinking we were getting ready to head out, he told me that they switched it up. I don't know if there was already a pilot boat out there from the new Staten Dam that was going to go to Symphony, but we ended up staying and waiting for the Disney Dream to pull out. So it was cool listening to the call outs to the pilot boat as the Dream was coming out. And then I think Tyler alluded to it earlier. Once the ships get out, you can hear the calls between the pilot boat captain and the pilot up on the ship, and they're calling out like, oh, like we're coming down, we're going to turn the ship this direction, or get ready to come alongside. And then I think even yesterday when we were in Canaveral, was it yesterday? Either yesterday or Sunday, I don't know, one of the ships was going out and they were going to pick up the pilot on the starboard side, but then they did a call out. I don't know what it was for, but they ended up switching it to the port side. So the pilot boat, ended up backing off and going around. So it was cool to see it from the perspective of being on the ship and then being on the pilot boat.
Yes, absolutely. Those are always neat. You see, you hear on the radio all the time, watch ship spotting, but you don't know, like, what is he talking about? Starboard side on the channel? Like, what's that meaning? Right. But kind of like, okay, this is what he's talking about here, and vice versa here. Because, yeah, it's very tricky there with the pilot boats, the whole operation size, because most ports only have about 2 to 3 pilot boats. Typically only about 1 or 2 on operation. One of the busier ports like Everglades in Miami or Biscayne Bay always have about 2 boat operators on call, so they can pretty much run 2 boats. But like Canaveral, for the most part, there's only 1 full-time boat operator. So whenever they have to bring a second pilot boat into operation because of the scheduling, because Canaveral, like cruise ships, like same with Port Everglades here, you're talking at a departure at 15:30, another one at 1600, and maybe 2 at 1600. Now, typically those never actually leave the dock right at 1600, but you never know. They could. Like there was a situation, I think, like on Monday in Canaveral, where there was the Mariner and then the Freedom and I think the Allure. They were right back to back to back. They were like, I don't know,
Same
like
with
one
Liberty,
ship
too.
lengths from each other. It was crazy seeing on the webcam. It was But yeah, they had to use 2 pilot boats, so they had to get someone come in for those jobs, and then they had to go ahead and run the boat all the way offshore. Now they luckily had one of the pilot boats stay offshore a little longer and get those 2 ships, but the problem is you can't have the boats sitting offshore too long because those pilots have to get back and do other jobs. So that's why you want, back to the point we talked about earlier in the podcast, you want your faster pilot boats so your pilots can get back to do more jobs without having to bring in more personnel, which will in turn make everyone less money. So
Yeah, and the transfer, at least when I was on Ascent, was quick. I mean,
yes,
we came off because they took us to the crew elevator. I'm assuming that's how they do it for other ones, but they took us down, and from the time we got out of the elevator to being on the pilot boat was maybe 30 seconds. I mean, it was boom, boom, boom. Like the pulled alongside, we came down, and it immediately went out and turned around, and so it's a pretty quick transfer.
yep.
Yeah, that like I watching your video, like the GoPro footage, like strapped to you and everything like that. Like you could see the pilot literally just walked right up, turned around, and just stepped down the ladder, and she was on the boat.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was
I mean, they
just
do it
like
so
that.
often, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
muscle memory for them.
Yep.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. Like in those Port Everglades ports and ports with shorter transit times, where they're not as far offshore, yeah, they're off the pilot on the pilot boat quick. Canaveral, a lot of times the pilot's at the door already by the time the pilot boat gets to it. The problem is in Canaveral, it's a far transit out, so because they go pretty much, I think 6 miles or
Wow.
4 miles offshore for the outbound, and then 6 miles for the inbounders. So pretty much the pilot, they're waiting on the pilot boat to come alongside here because the pilot boat is constantly also checking to make sure the ladder is rigged properly too. So he's or the boat operator's looking at the ladder, making sure that everything is on the good before the pilot gets off. Of course, because the boat operators are just as important as the pilots in terms of the safety of the port because they're responsible for the pilots' lives driving the boats here, and they're also responsible if anything does happen to get them out of the water. So those are vital members too. Again, a lot of people get confused. I want to point this out to the viewers here. A lot of people do get confused. The pilot boat, the pilot is not on the pilot boat while the ship is transiting the port. The pilot is on the ship and the pilot transfers to that boat. A lot of folks I hear all the time, it's kind of reasons why I want to do the pilot video first off, was correct the narrative that the pilot is on the ship, pilot boat giving instructions to the ship, which is not the case.
No, you're right. They are on the ship. I am living proof of that. I was also on the ship, and Tyler's been on the pilot boat several times. But yes, they board the ship. At least for departures, they board the ship at the pier when the ship's at the terminal. They ride it all the way out to the transfer point, and then they pop off and head on back.
Yep.
And
actually, speaking of the,
Go ahead, Brian.
I don't know why this reminded me of it, but so on, I think it was on Sunday, just like the radio calls, starboard, like how they get on the ships, get off the ships, things like that when they're in port. Usually they'll just walk through like the crew gangways and things like that. Justin was here for it, so he'll know what I'm talking about, but you'll find this funny. So we were waiting for the ships to start leaving, and I think it was the Wonder. It was either the Wonder or the Allure. I don't remember which one it was. It was one of the 2 days. But we hear, "Oh, Port Canaveral pilots, we had the ladder rigged out, and it's dropped here for you." And they just come over. We're boarding shoreside.
Yeah, and this was after they had already called earlier to confirm the departure time, and it was already stated that the pilot would be boarding shoreside. I don't know what
It was the
I'm
funniest.
talking about. Yes.
You just hear,
That's the thing.
"Oh,
Yeah.
right."
hilarious.
So when we eventually get a pilot on the ship, that's one of the questions I want to ask is like, how often does this happen? Because it must happen all the time where these ships come. That's like I'm amazed. Like these cruise ships, like Allure of the Seas, it goes to Canaveral. What is probably here for about a year, give or take, doing the short cruises. So they're doing 2 sailings a week. So that's probably 52. So that's probably 104 sailings, give or take. So they go to this port so many times. You would think, and the crew is on contract for a good 6 months period of time. It's not like they're getting a new crew every week. You would think they would at least understand, okay, the pilot's going to board shoreside almost every week. So it's a trend. And you also do think that they are going to be, okay, they're going to have the ladder rigged a certain way. For example, Canaveral, some ports have, I don't think Port Everglades does it, but they have the ropes on the side. I don't think Canaveral and Port Everglades use those ropes. Did you see that or?
Ropes as in like
They're throw ropes with the ladder. So there's a ladder rigged, and then there's 2 ropes on the side you can grab onto.
I
Was that
mean,
not
they
rigged?
had. I mean, they guess they did technically have ropes, but that was just like where the ladder planks were like attached to. They didn't have
Yes, no, but
anything
they're
extra than
separate to
that.
ladder. So they're like
Like
No, no,
different.
no,
as an
no.
Oh,
example.
okay.
So this like the rope, and then this is they have like the less is the ladder, and then this is another rope they have. It's like two on each side.
Gotcha. No, they did not. I
Okay.
was actually
Yes.
holding on to the ropes that
Yep.
were connecting like
Okay.
the planks. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Because in like some ports like San Francisco, they use those ropes on the other side of the ladder, not connected to the ladder, as the pilot to like help, because they have a longer transfer, so they have to get to the ship. Although the pilot boats are bigger, so they have to jump a little bit backwards. So they use that to kind of catapult themselves backwards.
Gotcha. Yeah,
But
no, it was just the
that's the thing.
ladder.
Yeah, as you mentioned though, yeah, in Canaveral, like pilots rare. It's a rare incident if they're ever boarding seaside. That's because 9 times out of 10 there's no need for them to board seaside. The harbor
it's kinda
master is
pointless.
going to the port, to the ship, I should say, and so they'll swing by the pilot headquarters, pick up the pilot, head to the ship because the harbor master has to go there already. So it just makes sense. Plus, they
Yeah.
don't have to worry about driving and all this stuff. And the pilot boats only have to be used for one thing, and that's to pick up the pilot and take him to the job. Again, rare situations when that happens, and usually that's because of timing. Like when pilots coming from another job, vice versa here. So, or the dock is not a port authority dock, so the harbor master can't pick it up. Like the Navy dock, the pilots have to be picked up by a pilot boat because they don't have a way to get there. So, in Everglades, how is that situated? The pilot do they get an Uber or they drive in personally to the job? How is that operate? Because I know Canaveral, they just meet at the headquarters and then they just take a harbor master's truck to the ship. How does that work in Everglades? The pilot drive to the ship and then.
Yeah, so at least from my experience, now Port Everglades is a
Okay.
huge port, so it might be different depending on what ship you're
Yes.
on. But my
Yep.
experience, especially the way I did it, and she did it the same way, we just pulled up to this little employee parking lot in between
Okay.
terminals 25 and 26, and we just walked from that parking lot onto the pier through one of like the truck entrances, like where they drop off the supplies, and literally just walked onto the ship.
wow.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's something that again, as I mentioned earlier, varies port by port here, but a lot of ports do it where the pilots meet at one area and they get either take the pilot shuttle if there's many pilots, or they just. But that's interesting that they do it that way, or go by pilot boats. So that's interesting there.
So they might do it like that because when we followed the Disney Dream out, we picked up the pilot, and he was also parked. He was parked next to me. Like he wasn't there when I left because we left earlier than the
Okay.
Dream. So now that you mention it, he probably took some kind of shuttle Uber from the parking lot at 25 all the way around to the north side of the port to meet up with the Disney Dream because she was docked at 4. So they might just use that parking lot, and we might have just got lucky because our ship was right next to it. So now that you mention it, they might do that depending on what ship they go on.
Interesting stuff. Yeah. That's some of the things you don't think about too. Some of the things you don't think about the logistics, but there's a lot of logistics here with pilotage.
Yeah.
Pilot boats, and then how they get to the ship too. Like Canaveral, for example, Everglades again is different. Say Miami, the bigger ports typically the pilot like stays at the pilot station, which all the ports have a pilot office, and with the boat slip usually attached next to it. In Canaveral though, they're at home when they're not working. That's because there's not enough traffic in Canaveral to require, or is the facility adequate enough to support a pilot staying 12-hour shifts at the pilot headquarters, because there is just not the facilities in terms of housing and all that stuff for them to live a full 28 days at the pilot station. It's just not need for it. So
Right, and I don't know how it is in Fort Lauderdale because they're a busy port, especially this time of
Yep.
year. But the pilot I was with that particular day literally came from a monster truck show to the port. Like I got there before her actually. So I was like,
That's
hey, like
funny.
I'm here. I just parked. She's like, oh, I'll be there in a few minutes. I just left the monster truck show. I go, you what?
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
She was,
funny.
like, showing
That's the
us
thing-
pictures
That's one
when we
cool
were-
thing about pilots too, is that they can go ahead and they can have flexibility doing other things, because again, there's a set time for ships, and after that, as long as you're not on duty or most ports have is what they call a day man and a night man, basically meaning that their job and their responsibility is to cover almost all traffic during those 12-hour time frames, and then the other pilots are called in for cruise shifts. Typically, that's the way most cruise ports operate. Is there'll be one or two pilots that do most of the traffic, during those 12-hour periods that that they can do it by themselves. But if there's more ships like cruise ships during that departure, they'll call in other pilots. But between that, if you're not the day man or the night man, you're not responsibility for being at the pilot station. So you can do what you want as long as you're there at that job. You can do what you want as long as you're at the office by that time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
once
cool.
we got back from being on Ascent, we actually dropped her off and she went home. And then I just, I ended up being allowed to stay for the other two ships to go out.
Awesome.
But yeah, she showed up at like 3:10ish, 3:15, went on the ship, took it out, got brought back and went home. So she only probably worked, again, I don't know, maybe she's sometimes on call, like on schedule for a longer period, but this day she worked for maybe an hour and a half, maybe. And that was only because Caribbean Princess was struggling to get out because it was so windy. But yeah, she was in and out. That was all she did that day.
That's crazy.
Yep. And the other thing too, which is interesting, is like Canaveral, for example, because we don't have as many pilots as Port Everglades, or some of the other ports here. Canaveral, because of the cruise ships, we have so many cruise ships, but not enough pilots. And this is also the reason they don't want too many pilots either, because it will take away from the profits, as well as it will also mess up the times in terms of scheduling. Like you're going to have too many pilots for not as much traffic, because this traffic comes in waves with the cruise ships. But with the cruise ships, most of the pilots, what they do is they'll head out to a cruise ship, first thing in the morning. So I'll probably be about, give or take, get to the pilot station around 3:30 in the morning, get on the pilot boat for that first cruise ship at 4:30 in the morning, bring it in, be alongside back at the office by 6 o'clock, back home by about 7:30, depending on traffic and all that stuff. And then you're basically off duty until you're back at the office at give or take 3:30, anywhere from that until 6 o'clock at night, and then you're back doing it all again the next day, depending on the day of the week. So yeah, it's very interesting. Again, it's great flexibility in terms of hours. That's why a lot of people like doing the pilots as their end goal, because of that flexibility it offers. It does take a lot of work to get there, by the way. It's not an easy job. You can't just walk in and get that job. It takes many years of schooling, experience, and then you also need to get those licenses by the Coast Guard, as well as take the rigorous test by the state of Florida, one of the hardest exams in the entire world to get a pilot. They don't pick just anyone for a pilot.
Right. I do like this. I like this thing we have in the live chat here. How does the adverse weather work with the pilots? I know you guys probably a little bit more with that, but I like the question. I definitely needed to be talked about, because I know that's definitely something that they do come across, is this adverse weather.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they as long as the ships are coming in and out, the pilots are out there. That's one of the more dangerous parts of the job. I saw videos from one of the pilot boat captain that I was with. He was, while we were waiting for Disney Dream to come out, he was showing me some stuff on his Instagram. And I mean, there are times where he's up alongside the ship and him and the ship are doing this, So, and I'm sure Tyler can give you more information on it, but as long as the ships are coming in and out, the pilot boats are out there as well.
Yep. It's definitely it's not a safe job. Of course, probably 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be a pretty quick, easy transfer. But I mean, there are a lot of safety and, the boat designs that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Like that's a big thing, is safety for the pilots, because it's a dangerous job.
Yep.
Yes. Those are the three things that they're, what everyone's really working on now. Is number one is trying to get the marine pilot ladder set up where everyone is more compliant. We talked about that earlier. Making sure everyone's ladder is rigged properly, because then that's a situation you don't have to worry about. You don't have to worry about your ladder giving up on you, because it's expected, and everyone knows how it's properly rigged. The other thing too, boat designs we mentioned here earlier, that's also, they're trying to work on more safety for pilot boats, whether that is with the propulsion, maybe use the jet drive. So if someone does fall in the water, they can stop the pilot boat just like that. No props in the fact of the pilot boat hurting the pilot. The other one that they're also working on, of course, is other ways that they can help with pilot safety involving flotation devices. But with the weather, pilots are pretty much moving ships 24/7, 7 days a week, as long as the ports are open and as long as the conditions allow. For example, Justin knows this. He lives over there in Tampa Bay. When there's fog, the pilots say, nope, we're not bringing those ships in. But that's because of many reasons. Tampa's case because of the bridge, but other ports, it's just not safe. It's just, and you can't trust the computers either. You can't have faith in the technology. You have to be able to see it, and that's another reason to pilot too. The pilot can't deny a ship no matter what. He and she can say, I'm not doing this job. we're going to wait until another day. And he and she is within their rights to go ahead and do it. They have no whatsoever repercussions from the cruise line, no repercussions from anyone except the government, which most of the time is on their side. So they don't worry about anyone. They only answer to the governor in case here in Florida. So again, they have a lot of flexibility in terms of safety, and that's their number one priority for most pilot associations in the world. Is safety is our number one priority, and that's not just their safety, it's safety of the local environment. And having a catastrophic accident of a ship accidentally hitting something because of weather, something that the pilots don't want, and something that they are vowed by law to make an oath to say they will not harm or have any environmental impact in Florida.
Yeah, and like you said with Tampa, a lot of the main issue there is the fog, but a lot of people don't understand that because so driving distance, the bridge is about an hour or so from where the port is, but by ship, it's about 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours. So sometimes the whole area is fogged over, but other times it's just the bridge that's fogged over, and that's what causes these delays. So you could be sitting like in a hotel in Tampa waiting to get on your ship, and it's beautiful out, like there's not a cloud in the sky. But an hour away, if the bridge is fogged out, they will not. They'll shut the bridge. They won't even let cars go over. They will shut it down completely until the fog clears out. And people are like, "Oh, but it's not foggy here at the port. Like, what's the problem?" Like, the problem is the bridge. And like Tyler said, the pilots will not. They will not take the ship under the bridge in the fog. They're just not going to risk it.
Exactly. Everyone's life is more important than someone's time schedule. That's right.
Yeah. They've already had to rebuild that bridge once because of a fog.
They don't want to do it another time. No.
They don't want to do it again. Maybe it might be beneficial in the long run, but they definitely don't want to do that.
Yeah, they don't want someone's life being harmed because of that. Exactly. So that's the thing. Again, pilot safety. That's the reason two pilots come on board. Is they're looking out for the state, and they're looking at the interest of the state in terms of safety. Versus the ships have their own agendas, whatever ship it is. It could be cruise, cargo. They have their agendas, whether that's scheduling, whether that's I need to get here to discharge. You name it, they have their own reasonings for what they do. Versus a pilot's number one reason is safety. At the end of the day, that's pretty much why they're there, is to number one, of course, be your local expert, but the other reason is for safety here. It's crucial at the way of life for pilots.
Yep.
And I know one thing,
Absolutely.
and I know you mentioned earlier, it depends on the port, who's in control, things like that. I know the biggest thing every time I see, it's of course not often, but accidents with cruise ships and accidents with cargo ships happen. Yeah, everybody's like, "Oh, the pilot's in trouble for this one." I'll let Tyler explain that one a little bit better.
Yes, so
how
it's a
that
very
actually
tricky situation
plays
here.
out.
Yep. So when the collision happening, a lot of the times the pilot does have a responsibility. However, most of the time with cruise ship collisions, especially, the pilot actually is not handling the ship. So he technically has as much responsibility as that one officer on the ship who's just there observing. So he's as that level of observance. Now, if the pilot has con, he has more to blame, which most of the situations the pilot does not have con, because most of the time the ship is in a docking state. That means the captain or whatever officer the captain chose to perform that docking maneuver, they have the con, which is, by the way, if you're wondering, Tyler, Justin, Brandon, what is con? Con is
Control.
C means control of navigation here. So that is your con. Yep. Control of navigation here. That is what con means. So con is something that is very important here. You'll always hear on bridge watches here, you'll see say pilot has con or officer of the watch, third officer has con. That's something that is very important because one person at all times is dedicated to have all control of navigation. So their responsibility is to steer the vessel, whatever course and heading that is.
Yeah, and when I was on ascent, it was the same thing. We were on the starboard starboard bridge wing for the first half of the departure, and I don't know exactly how they phrased it, but they basically said switching the con to the center or whatever, however they worded it, and that was taking the control from the starboard bridge wing to the center as the ship was finishing its pivot to line up and head out. So yeah.
That's one really cool thing about ships, and I feel like most people probably just think of cruise ships like the navigational bridge is like a car. Like you have the steering wheel in the middle, but it's not like that at all. And you can switch the con between. There's usually there's an entire station on each bridge wing. Typically, there's one on each bridge wing, and then there's also just the center part of it all. So, you can switch, controls and the power to the controls from each side of the ship to where, of course, like when you're docking, you kind of want to stand on the bridge wing. You don't want to be standing in the middle going, like looking over your shoulder like you're emerging onto the highway. Like, huh?
Right.
Yes.
Is there something
yes.
behind me?
Yeah,
Like-
you can
Exactly,
do
exactly.
everything. Each control, area on the bridge
Mhm.
wings in the middle can do everything that the other ones can do. So,
Right.
if they wanted to, they can do everything from the bridge wing. They could do everything from the center. But like Brandon said, when you're coming along the pier or you're making a turn in a certain direction, you want to be able to see down the length of the whole ship to kind of see where you're, maneuvering the ship, especially with
Right.
the way Celebrity goes out of, at least the edge class out of that terminal. They back out and spin, so it's, you definitely want that side view as you're coming, and then once you're finishing the turn, you can shift over and
Absolutely. That's
Right.
one of the things too crucial here is the reason why that control is in the middle of the ship is so with ships there's you should call your port side, of course, which is your left, and then your starboard side, which is your right. But in the middle of the ship, I'm sure Justin, you probably heard it called mid-ship. That means you're on a straight bearing.
Yep.
So that is one of the critical things that you can't say I'm mid-ship and you see the ship turning unless you're really at the center of the ship, so you can actually see a right straight down the barrel shot of what's going on. So it's one of the
Right.
reasons why there is 3 controls on bridges. Now most big ships do have that's 3 sides of the bridge wing or the bridge control center. Some of the smaller ships with like not as big bridge wings, which most of the modern cruise ships have those big overhanging bridge wings. Most ships in general do have them.
Very
But a
large.
few of those smaller vessels don't have them, but for the most part, any major ship will have those bridge wings.
Yeah.
So-
I've
Yep.
noticed, I think maybe the Sovereign class is probably the last like major cruise ship from one of the major cruise lines, at least. It's like one of the last maybe sets of ships that actually had like the or like the outdoor bridge wings.
Yes.
I think Vision has it too.
The Vision has it
Vision,
too, yeah.
maybe,
Yes.
maybe it's
Yep.
the Vision class. So yeah, it's not very often that you see something like that anymore.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
of course, just advances in technology and also just making sure everything is kind of more protected. Yeah, especially during adverse weather, you don't want to be standing. Could you imagine being out on one of those bridge wings in full control of the ship, and you're like, oh my god.
And it's
I'm
like
gonna blow
pouring rain or
off the
something.
ship and I'm trying to dock the thing. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
It must be
Yeah,
wild.
exactly.
Whoa.
Exactly.
It's
So
crazy.
It's
crazy stuff in the piloting world. Yeah.
Yep.
absolutely.
Very interesting.
But yeah,
Absolutely
so
here.
as we kind of start to wrap things up, was there any like closing statements you guys have? Again, you guys have experienced this, so you guys are much more knowledgeable. So I definitely want to see like I guess just final statements, final things you guys have to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very unique experience. I'm really glad I got to do it. Thank you, Tyler, for kind of helping me get into the right direction. I really appreciate it. I got a lot more out of it than I thought I was. So it was really cool to see, a lot of the technical stuff that goes on as the ship's going out. And there's going to be a little bit before I do a next one just because of scheduling and stuff. But there are several plans to do it again from Fort Lauderdale, whether it's on the Ascent again or beyond over the summer or one of the Royal Caribbean ships. I'm not sure, but I will be doing it again and I can't wait.
Absolutely. That's exciting, Justin. I'm kind of the same boat as Justin right here. Of course, big shout outs to Justin and Brandon as always for, of course, inspiring me to start the channel here. Now we're making content together here. Of course, always big shout outs to them. Got a great stuff coming down the pipeline with them. But I have also pilot stuff coming out too. I have something on the schedule here for the next few months. I actually have a video I shot with the Carnival pilots back in the winter with Caleb. That's still in the editing pipeline. Like it's like far back in the pipeline for editing to get done. I still have Lord of the Seas stuff to edit. But after that, I have that. And then I'm actually going out hopefully sometime this spring to go film a port that not many people think about when they think cruise ships, but they do have one. It may not be the best or the biggest, but it is a cruise ship nonetheless. And that is the Palm Beach, the port of Palm Beach. So we're going to go down there and show you that. The only reason is too I want to go down there and show all of my viewers here is they have a pilot boat that is changing the game for pilots. And that is because it's outboard powered and Florida is getting 4 of those boats. So we're going to go ahead and go down there and film that video for you guys here. Hoping to work all of that stuff out nonetheless. Not sure what content I'll be able to film. We're still working out that with the pilots in terms of what we're able to film or what other videos, but I do expect some stuff coming in the pipeline sometime this spring/summer whenever I get around to editing it after I film it here. So yeah, I'm excited, and hopefully one day too I can make it down to Port Everglades and film some content with those guys because absolute greatness stuff down there in South Florida with Port Everglades, Miami, Palm Beach, you name those Florida ports. All the pilots here can't really complain. Any day out with them, it's always good being surrounded with these absolute master mariners out there on the water.
Yeah, and you can
Absolutely.
ask Brandon. Besides that $40 parking ticket we got, Fort Lauderdale was kind of fun ship spotting at.
Yeah, it was a great time. Other than the parking ticket, it was a great time.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, exactly. What are you gonna do? Well, yeah, the pilots, it definitely is just like one of those sides of cruising that you don't see. It's very unique. It again, it's like the I guess behind the scenes of the behind the scenes.
Yes.
Like, cruise lines offer
For
these
real.
behind the scenes tours, but you really don't see anything
one's known
from
about
what
that.
the pilots,
Yep.
and there's always a lot of misconception about the pilots. Like what
Exactly.
in
That's
the
one of the
world do
reasons I
they
wanted to do
do?
the content. Yep.
Exactly, and that's
one
kind
of
of
the
what we
reasons I
did
wanted
this
to do my stuff.
episode for, because
Exactly.
knowing you
And
guys.
hopefully, as mentioned in the beginning of the show, hopefully we'll do a part 2 with an actual pilot on the show.
Right.
Again, just waiting on finding that right pilot to join us, but hopefully that will come out sometime this year. We'll figure someone to get on the show. So,
Right.
yeah, again, I'll enjoy doing this. And again, do a part 2, even if we can't get a pilot on the show, maybe do a part 2 with just Q&A. Who knows? So,
Yeah.
Exactly.
it's a pleasure talking pilots, boys. And thanks for having me on. I'll be back next week, hopefully, with the great Icon of the Seas. I'll
Icon
be
of the
co-hosting
Seas,
that, I believe.
baby.
Actually, I'll be hosting that,
Live
actually. I'm
from
hosting it.
Icon of the Seas. Live
That's
from
right.
Icon of the Seas, next week's podcast. Definitely stay tuned for all of that. Anyways, boys, it's been fun. Thank you, everybody who's been listening and watching to this point. We'll see you next time on board Icon of the Seas for next week's podcast. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening and watching.
Bye.
Bye.